The previous ayah was, He elevated the sky, put down a scale. All for what? So that you don't violate when it comes to scales. So you don't violate. So there's a connection now being made between the galaxies and the orbits and the universe with who? Me. With me directly. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد everyone once again السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Okay, so we're going to move to ayah number 6 now. You'll see a continuity, ash-shams, wal-qamar, and now we see the word wan-najm, right? So the sun, the moon, and now we see the word star. There are two opinions on what the word najm means in the Arabic language. Najm can also mean blades of grass or low plants, plants that you can walk on and they don't get damaged. Essentially, you can think of them as blades of grass, right? So there are two interpretations here. There are a number of ways we can translate this ayah. Here's a few. And even the star, and I noticed I put the word star in capital, and we'll see why that is. And even the star and the tree fall in humility. And even the star and the tree bow, will, actually meant to say, shall bow in surrender. And even the blade of grass and the tree bow in surrender. So the third one I said blade of grass, right? As opposed to star. Because najm has both meanings. So this is kind of a quick overview of what this ayah is about and what it's referring to. But now we're going to get a little deeper and talk about an important concept in language. So, what's sajda? Somebody explain it to me. You guys know what sajda is? You guys know what salah is? You guys know what ruku' is? You guys know what qiyam? You guys know these things, right? So these are words we use as Muslims, and they have a particular meaning. Islam came and gave these words a specific meaning. The word sajda used to have a meaning before Islam. But when Islam came, and Muslims started using this word, the sajda in Islam is a very specific kind of ritual, right? So what happens in language is, there's a word that has a meaning, and then when a science or a new subject or a new culture or revolution even takes over, then that same word can have a different meaning, right? So an interesting non-religious example of that is a bird used to tweet, and now presidents do, right? So with the emergence of technology, the same word now has a completely different meaning, right? So, this guy is tweeting so much. If you said that to somebody in the 1980s, they would recommend you to a psychiatric ward, which they should probably still do. But anyway, the word sajda, we think of it as, putting our head on the ground, putting our palms on the side, and that's the image of sajda in our mind. But the Quran and Arabic language actually use the word sajda beyond the ritual meaning also. Okay, so this ayah is going to use it beyond the ritual meaning. So we have to go back into the origins of Arabic. How was the word being used in Arabic before Islam came along? Right? And then we can appreciate what's happening inside of this ayah. Because it is saying, whether it's the star or the blade of grass and the tree, they're both doing sajda. Yasjudan, they're both doing sajda. So what does that mean? As-sujud asluhu at-tatamun wat-tadhallul wal-inqiyad. The origin of sujud is to bow down, to lower yourself, to humble yourself, to weaken yourself, and to come to a position of surrender. Like the image of a soldier laying down his arms and falling on his knees before the enemy? Like that kind of an image? When you become overpowered and overwhelmed and you fall in surrender, that's the image actually of sujud. وجعل ذلك عبارة عن التذلل لله وعبادته, and this then became a term to express that powerlessness we feel before Allah and in our worship to Him. They used to say نخلة ساجدة أمالها حملها, a palm tree that is doing sajda. A palm tree doing sajda, when its branches used to, the weight of the fruit would bow it down and would lower its branches. وَعَيْنٌ سَاجِدَةٌ فَاتِرَةُ الطَّرْفِ. They used to say about an eye that's doing sajda when it's kind of looking down. Like when the eye just kind of lowers, that's actually عَيْنٌ سَاجِدَةٌ. سَجَدَتِ النَّخْلَةِ مَالَتْ, we did that. سَجَدَتِ الْإِبْلِ وَأَسْجَدَتْ خَفَضَتْ رَأْسَهَا لِتُرْكَبْ. When the camel lowers its head so you can ride on it, they say the camel is doing sajda. So it's not doing an act of worship, it's just humbling itself for the owner so they can get on it. وَكَانَ كِسْرَى يَسْجُدُ لِلسَّهْمِ الطَّالِعِ أَن يَخْفِضُ رَأْسَهُ إِذَا شَخَصَ سَهْمُهُ عَنِ الرَّمْيَةِ. I thought this was pretty funny. لِيَسْتَقِيمَ السَّهْمُ. So Khaysaras, the Persian emperor, Kisra, he used to love doing archery. So when he would do archery, he wasn't a good archer apparently. So he would overshoot the target, so that the target is here and the arrow would go over it. Right? And he knows that it's going to fly over. So when it was flying over, they say he used to do sajda, meaning he used to kind of lower his head as if he's instructing the arrow to go down. Like what you do in video games, like, you know. And that was called him lowering his head to kind of almost instruct the arrow to go down with it. This was called sajda. So the idea of sujood then is basically humility and lowering yourself. Of course, the ultimate beautiful expression of that humility and lowering yourself is the ritual that the Prophet taught us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the way that we do sajda. But any act of lowering yourself and humbling yourself can actually be described as a sajda. Okay, so then what it's saying is the star and the tree, they both humble themselves. They both lower themselves. So you don't have to, how does the tree do sajda? It doesn't have two hands. What it's going to do? No, just relax. It doesn't have to do any of that for it to do sajda. But we're going to dig into what could that mean. Now, ismu jam'ina ala nujum as-sama, this najm could refer to all the stars in the sky. It could also refer to, like I said, low plants that don't have a bark, that don't have a stem, like blades of grass. And they're attached to the ground. يسجدان من حيث التقابل لما أن الشمس والقمر علويان. Alusi says, he likes the view that this is referring to grass. So the grass and the tree, okay, they do sajda. So he says it's beautiful because in the previous ayah, the sun and the moon follow Allah on the precise count, and now the lower beings, the tree and the grass, they humble themselves before Allah. So the high and the low are all in submission to Allah. So that's kind of how he contrasts these two. سجودهما أنهما يستقبلان الشمس إذا طلعت ثم يميلان معها حتى ينكسر الفيء. Qurtubi says their humility, the humility of grass and the tree, is that when the sun rises, in photosynthesis, the flower turns towards the sun, right? So the fact that the tree and its branches or its leaves, they incline towards the sun, and the blade of grass turns towards the sun, that is its sajda. خُضُوعُهُمَا لِلَّهِ تَعَالَى وَخُرُوجُهُمَا مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. How humble they are to Allah, and the way they come out of the ground, how they grow, that itself is a kind of sajda, Imam Razi says. What I'm going to share with you, there's a few things here. One is continuity of imagery. So in Surah An-Najm, Allah mentioned the star falls, وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى. And falling is actually one of the meanings of sajda. So here the star is, if it's the meaning of the same najm, the star is also falling. And then there's also the star, the moon, then the sun. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. So Surah Al-Najm, then Surah Al-Qamar. And now we get الشمس والقمر والنجم. We get kind of the three of them together. So it's kind of picking up the pieces from the previous surahs and building up a narrative. Now, the stars are humbled by day. What does that mean? Because when the day comes, what happens to the stars? They're spirit. They're humbled before. They don't get to show their glory. They're gone from our eyes. And the tree that looks beautiful and is a source of shade and source of comfort and a mark of beauty during the day, like your backyard, becomes humbled at night because now it doesn't have any of those features. Its charms are gone. Perhaps the two phrases symbolic of the sky and the earth, meaning the sky, the star referring to the sky, and the tree referring to the earth. The possible connection to Judgment Day. Now let's talk about that. Remember in the previous ayah, one of its implications, husban, is that the sun and the moon are on the verge of destruction now because the Quran has now come. If that is the meaning, then one of the underlying meanings of this ayah can be that the star and the tree will eventually be falling into sajda. They're going to be falling. Now, the Quran does say, إِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انْتَثَرَتْ. And he says, إِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ. When the stars lose their light, or when the planets and the heavenly bodies start falling down. And falling down is the image of what again? Of sajda. But what does the tree doing sajda have to do with anything? My reading of this is, Allahu A'lam, the Arabs, because the place in which the Quran was revealed was a desert climate, open landscape, and a very harsh weather. Like, you guys know now recently there's some new greenery in the area, but like overall that place is extremely, extremely harsh climate, right? And even Ibrahim alayhi salam described it as wadin ghayri dhi zar', right? A valley that doesn't cultivate. Now, for the Arab, at night, the night sky is maybe the more beautiful than any other place in the world. Possibly. Why? Because there's no development, there's no city lights, and it's clear night desert sky. So there's not a place in the sky where you don't see stars. We don't have that experience anymore because we see some stars, but it's not like the actual night sky of the desert. If you see the night sky of the desert, you'd be in shock. That's what the sky looks like? Right? There's not a place you don't see stars. It's completely packed. So for the Arab, and this is something I've taught in Surah An-Najm, for the ancient Arab, they had a very romantic connection with the night sky. And they knew a lot about the stars. They actually had names for all the stars, for many of the stars and constellations. They used them in poetry. They used to talk about stars the way you talk about like NBA athletes. Honestly. Like, when they used to trash talk to each other, like he thinks he's all that. Oh, he thinks he's Thuraya. He thinks he's the constellation Pleiades. Or you think that's your uncle or something? Like, that's how they used to talk to each other. Like, you say, oh, you think you're LeBron? Like, that's what they would say. So, إِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انْتَثَرَتْ إِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ. The most beautiful thing to the Arab in the night sky, what was the night sky at night? But what's the most beautiful thing to the Arab in the day? What do you think? It's not beautiful. The sun is not beautiful to the Arab. The sun is definitely not beautiful to the Arab. If they can find out in the desert landscape somewhere, if they can find a single what? Tree. Man, that is amazing. A tree? Because that's a rare commodity. The symbol of beauty in Arab literature and tradition and culture, the symbol of beauty at night is the night sky. And the symbol of beauty in the day is what? The tree, right? And those two are the ones that are falling. When najmu was shajaru, the two symbols that catch their eye more than anything else are the ones that are about to fall into sajda. So everything you know to be beautiful, everything you know to find comfort in, right? And the other interesting thing with stars and trees are sustenance and the stars are guidance, right? And those are the two things. Like in the desert, you need sustenance and you need guidance. And they used to navigate by way of the stars, are going to fall into sajda. Allah is also perhaps saying here that all of the universe, even right now, not even as Judgment Day comes, but even right now, everything is actually in complete humility before Allah. And I find this really interesting language because of this. In order to actually explain this to you, I'm going to take you to Surah An-Najm. I've had to do this the last couple of times because it's just that important. The Arabs used to use the word An-Najm not just for just any stars. In many of their poetries, they use the word An-Najm for a particular constellation of stars. The Arabs call it Ath-Thuraya. Okay? And in English, we call it the Pleiades. okay, or the Pleiades. That's a constellation in the sky that the Arabs were particularly fascinated with, okay? Now, you need to know some things about that because the Quran is making reference to it. One of the things you have to know is the Arabs used to tell whether winter season is starting or summer season is starting or spring season is starting by where Pleiades was in the sky. When the night came and they saw Pleiades right over their head, right above, like the noon time in the sun, they knew that now as the night goes on, it's going to fall in the west. That means winter is coming. If the next season around, they see that as soon, right before Fajr starts, the sun rises from the east, right before Fajr starts, they see that same Thuraya constellation right above the horizon. It disappears because the sun comes up. But if they see it there, you know what that means? Spring and summer are on the way. This was their understanding of the Najm. Okay? So the Najm is actually associated with seasons. The Najm is associated with season. And perhaps there's a connection being made between the stars and the seasons. And the seasons have to do with when the tree is going to grow. When Najmu was shajaru, this was something very well known to the ancient Arabs. And it's picking on something. One of the things that really makes our study of the Quran beautiful is to understand some things about ancient Arabian culture. Because Allah is actually the first audience of the Quran are the ancient Arabs. And if you don't understand their culture, you're going to miss out on some things that the Quran is saying. Right? And so, really important stuff that's being talked about here when Allah says that an-najm is the changing of the seasons. And of course, that's tied to the tree. And they both, as if to say the seasons do sajda. The sky does sajda and the earth does sajda. The winter does sajda and the summer does sajda. All of that gets encapsulated inside of these words. It's also interesting that the Najm, like I said in Surah Al-Najm, was actually doing a sajda. It was doing hawa, it was falling. Literally, the Najm starts up there. As the night continues, it falls down towards the western horizon. Right? So, وَالنَّجْمُ وَالشَّجَرُ يَسْجُدَانِ وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ. And the sky, He raised it and laid down the balancing scale. This is one of the heaviest 3 ayat, 7, 8, and 9 are tough ayat. And I pray I'm able to do some justice explaining this to you and tying all of this together. So Allah now is going to go from the sun, the moon, the star, the tree. Now we're going to go back to the entire horizon, the sky. Clearly a connection is being made between the sky and the earth, right? Another connection is now going to be made. And that is, He raised the sky and put down the scale. Raised the sky, put down the scale. So the first thing I want you to note here before we get inside of the ayah is, in the previous ayah we saw the stars and the tree, right? And the tree gives what to the Arab? Well, other than beauty, what does the tree give the Arab? Fruit, shade, material, construction material. Most importantly, fruit. Food. It's a food source, right? So there's an association between the sky and the rizq. The sky and rizq. And now there's going to be a different association. The sky and justice. So there's sky and rizq. And now there's sky and justice. We're going to have to keep these connections in mind as we move forward in the surah. Okay? Now, He says He raised the sky and put down the scale. What in the world does that mean? Well, first of all, He raised the sky sounds strange to the English reader, because how did the space is vacuum? How do you raise vacuum? Right? And it's not like the earth was created first. Now we know the earth forms over billions of years, but the rest of the universe was already much older. The earth is about 4 billion years old, but the known universe is approximately 14 billion years old, as far as we can see, right? So what does it mean that He raised the sky? This is why translations create a lot of problems. I've literally translated it and I'm not happy with translation. Why? Because you cannot translate culture. You can translate words from a dictionary, but you can't translate culture. It's called, majaz aqli in Arabic. It's a common usage. And one of the ways you can understand it is He made the sky, He meant the sky to be above you. In other words, you're down here and there's much more beyond you. So this is actually a statement about how limited your access is. as a human being. وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا. He elevated, the sky is way above you, and He made it much, much higher than you. Then the other problem is, even with the word sky, what am I translating as sky? As sama. But sama is actually even a masdar. It could mean all that lies beyond or above. Now somebody could say, what do you mean above? The earth is spherical. Is this above or this above? If you're on this side of the planet, that's above. If you're on top, that's above. If you're on the South Pole, it's a different above. If you're on the North Pole, it's a different above. So which above are you talking about? I'm going to have you understand this by way of a little bit of quantum physics. But I can make it super easy. Imagine the entire universe is a marble. The entire universe is what? A marble. And the planet Earth is a little tiny dot inside that marble. Right? And then all of the universe is like a marble. And of course, if you're inside that marble, you're like, which way is above? Because you could go in any direction and that could be above, right? Now, imagine there's a roof on top. The marble sitting on a table, there's something above it. Is this actually above it? Yeah, but the people inside the marble, or everything inside the marble, doesn't even understand that because it's still inside that marble. This is a different dimension. This is above and beyond that. You understand? Allah made how many skies? 7. We're in the first sky is that little marble, but then there's the second sky, it's actually above it, and then there's a third above that, and a fourth above that, and the fifth above that, and all of them can be captured in the words sama. Sama is not a reference to one sky, it's everything that is above. And Allah is describing the endless vastness of what He's created above us. And when He describes that, you're like, and if you guys watch any documentaries on the universe, which is the first sky, by the way, the physical, I said 14 billion years, that's the first sky. That's not the 7th skies, that's the first sky. This is important because Allah says, وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحِ. We decorated the lowest sky with stars. So as far as we can see stars, we're still dealing with first sky. That's just the first sky. So the light that reaches my eye from the farthest star, when I see it in the night, that light traveled 14 billion years to reach my eye. So I'm looking at 14 billion years of history. Sunlight that reaches my eye, the sunlight that we experience in the day, it takes 8 minutes to get here from the sun. You're not looking at the sun as it is now. You're looking at the sun as it was 8 minutes ago. That's actually, we're looking at history when we look at the sky, right? And beyond that is another and another, and there's 7. There's 7 of them. What does that make you feel? Oh, it makes you feel so insignificant, so insanely small. In fact, even if we didn't know about the 7 skies, if we just contemplated the first sky, we'd be like, human beings are entirely insignificant, and this is where the atheist has a field day. They're like, you guys believe there's a God that's worried about whether or not you stole like a little Kit Kat from the grocery store? You know, you're worried about that, and this entire billion, you're so self-centered that this entire universe, He created all of this, but He's focused on you. You're that important? Seriously? Your religion is not teaching you humility, it's teaching you arrogance. You think atheists are self-centered? You guys are the most self-centered. You think you're the center of the universe. You're the center of God's attention. God should pay attention to you. He doesn't have any black holes to worry about. He doesn't have entire galaxies to worry about. You know, this is the mindset. And this mindset sounds compelling. It does sound compelling. And Allah says He created a much more vast sky. And you are insignificant. So Allah, in that much I agree with the atheist. We are in size insignificant. What are we compared to this, what Allah has created? وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا. And then He says, وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ. And He put down the scale. He created a scale. Allah is now saying, in between the lines, that as vast as the universe is, I'm not just giving you rahmah. Remember the surah began with rahmah? I also hold you responsible for how you behave, because I've put some standards here. And don't you think that the universe is so big, God will be busy with other things, so I can just do my thing. It's okay. Allah's got other things to worry about. I'm sure there's a volcanic eruption somewhere in some planet somewhere that He has to deal with, so I can get away with my thing. No, He says, وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ. He put down the scale. He's directly concerned with you. If He can be directly concerned with, He can observe the blade of grass doing sajda, and the tree doing sajda, and every star doing sajda. You think you're going to get away? You think you're not being watched? You're not being observed? SubhanAllah, it's a really powerful statement that He makes when He says, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ. So what does wada'a mean? It means to send down the scale. Some said because of this ayah that Allah is saying He created a vast universe and beyond, and then He put the expectation of living according to balance on the earth. Wada'a means to bring down. That's why anzala is one of its meaning. Ayyana means to set or to appoint. So He appointed a scale. That's the hadith here is just using the word da' in the meaning of appointing. So let's look at some interpretations of this word. He set down the scale. Means وَضَعَ فِي الْأَرْضِ الْعَدْلَ الَّذِي أَمَرَ بِهِ, that he laid down an expectation in this world that we should live by justice. We should live by justice. Al-Mizan al-Quran. Others said Mizan here refers to the Quran, that He brought down the Quran. وَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ. He brought down the scale, and the scale is referring to the Quran itself, because the Quran is described as a scale too. أرادوا وضع الميزان في الآخرة لوزن الأعمال. Others said, no, Allah made this massive sky and He laid down the grounds for the final scale, meaning the scale on Judgment Day of our deeds. That's what this is referring to. الميزان الكتاب الذي فيه أعمال الخلق. The book in which all of our deeds are written, and every deed has a weight, and every one of those deeds will be weighed on the scale. That's what this is referring to. So these are the classical opinions on this. I see, like Mawdudi's comment on this, al-adlu fi nizam al-kainat liman al-fawda, like Allah put a scale and a harmony in the entire universe. What does the atheist see in the universe? He sees chaos. An atheist sees chaos in the universe. There's no order. We're just floating in the universe aimlessly, and at some point, some meteor might come and strike this planet and it will be over. That's the idea. Right? And Allah is saying no. He elevated the sky and He put everything in the right measure. There's a time where the sun and the moon will in fact collapse, but that's not going to happen because of some random accident. And until then, there is order and scale. Where the non-believer sees chaos, the believer actually sees mizan. They see balance. They see something else entirely. So, similar to this ayah, explaining this ayah is another ayah in the Quran. Surah Al-A'raf. Inna rabbakum Allah, your master is Allah. Alladhi khalaqa as-samawati wal-ard, the one who created the skies and the earth. Fi sittati ayyam, in 6 eras. Thumma istawa ala al-arsh, then He took upon the throne. Yughshi al-layla an-nahar yatlubuhu hathithan, wash-shamsa wal-qamara wal-nujuma. Sound familiar? الشمس والقمر والنجوم مسخرات بأمره, and the sun and the moon and the stars all surrendered by His command. ألا له الخلق والأمر. This is the point that I wanted to make here. You should know that creation and the command both belong to Him. There are 2 concepts here, creation and command. Allah created the universe, سماء رفعها. And then there's the command, وضع الميزان. There's 2 things happening at the same time. The world of khalq and the world of amr. Creation and command. Tabarakallahu Rabbul Alameen. So I've talked to you about the notion of sky and the notion of raised. And actually these things. But the last thing I didn't talk to you about. Before the discovery that the earth is not the center of the universe. And that, for a long time humanity believed that the sun revolves around the earth. Right? And they were still observing the stars. But they couldn't figure it out. And it was so much chaos. They had to come up with all these weird, pathways for the stars. And it was all chaotic. And then when we finally figured out that actually the earth is rotating around the sun, not the other way around, then the constellations and the stars and the navigation, all of it started making sense all of a sudden. In fact, the more we studied the universe, the more harmony we found, not the more chaos. That's actually actual history, right? And it teaches us something. When your worldview is centered from earth, and you think the earth is at the center, you only get chaos. But when Allah mentioned the scale, He didn't mention the earth first. What did He mention first? The sky. When you're focused on the sky, you will find balance. And it's spiritually true too. And it's materially true too. You know, airplanes, ships, whenever they travel, they have to have GPS navigation systems. Those GPS navigation systems depend on the constellations and the positions of the stars even now. If a pilot is in flight and their navigation system fails, and that happens sometimes, the software crashes. You know what they're trained to do? Look up. What do they look at? They look at the stars. Oh, we have to go this way. We have to go that way. They can still navigate. وَبِالنَّجْمِ هُمْ يَهْتَدُونَ. Allah says, by the stars, they find guidance. To this day, we look to the sky for guidance. And spiritually, guidance can only come from the sky. And one of the two things that both the material and the spiritual have in common is that spiritually, Allah gave us a scale. And we'll discuss that scale now. But even in the physical universe, Allah gave us a scale. This is here. This is here. This belongs here. This is at this distance. This is at this location. وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ. This is furthering the idea of husban that Allah mentioned already. And in ayah number 8, there's this amazing connection. Allah تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ. Let me just put it to you in the most simple ways. Imagine that we didn't have the Quran for a moment. Imagine that we didn't know about the final revelation. Right? You know what Allah is saying here? Allah is saying, if you can just pay attention to the sky, and you know how harmonious it is, and how much balance there is in it, just by observing the sky, you would know whoever put this together loves balance. He loves balance. And you'd reach the conclusion that He's made me too, and if He loves balance all over the universe, the only place that's out of balance is this planet, and the only place that's out of balance is my life and my behavior. Everything else is in balance, so I'm pretty sure He expects me to live according to what? Some kind of balance. I'll bring it closer to home. Like imagine that there's a guy back in the day, thousands of years ago, he's selling bananas, right? So he's got bananas on this side, and he's got the weight on this side. And he's trying to cheat his customer a little bit. So he gives him one less banana, right? You could rig the scale a little bit, right? And you know what? Allah is saying, if you just looked up at the sky and you saw how much balance there is in the sky, you wouldn't be messing with your banana sales. You'd act differently. Now, where am I getting all this from? From this ayah, أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ. The previous ayah was, He elevated the sky, put down a scale. All for what? So that you don't violate when it comes to scales. So you don't violate. So there's a connection now being made between the galaxies and the orbits and the universe with who? Me. With me directly. I'm directly connected to the skies. I don't need a khutbah on fairness. I don't need a khutbah on justice. You know what the khutbah on justice is? The sky. It's as if Allah has the right to ask me on Judgment Day, if I say, Ya Allah, I didn't know I shouldn't be cheating. Allah, I didn't know I shouldn't be stealing. Allah has the right to say, what, you never saw the sky? You never saw the sky? Think of it another way. You know, a manufacturer has a certain design. Designers have a certain design. How many people study architecture here? Anybody study architecture? One or two? Okay, alhamdulillah. So if you study architecture, you can pass by a building and you could say, I know that style. You can, if you know your stuff, you can even say, I know who the architect is. I bet you who they learned from or who they are. You can tell the design, from the design you can tell who the architect is. Some of you are into fashion. You see a pair of shoes from a distance, Chanel's. Right? You can see a purse from a distance, bootleg. Right? You know it's real or fake. Some people are into sneakers. That's their thing. That's what Allah created them for, is sneakers. You know, that's like the 1998 Jordans, limited edition. I was like, what are you smoking, bro? You know, Some people are into watches. They can tell, oh, from a distance, oh, that's a Tudor, that's a Rolex, that's a this, that's a that, that's, that's a Patek Philippe or whatever. They can tell. Some people are into cars, right? They can look from a distance. Oh, I know what that is. That's a Mercedes. Oh, wait, that's a Hyundai. They copied Mercedes. Okay, yeah. Right? What am I trying to get at? When you understand the designer, like, when you sign a document, you have a signature, but sometimes the design itself is a signature. Isn't it? Sometimes the design itself, you can see the painting. I know whose painting this is. I know whose architecture this is. I know whose fashion design this is. I know whose bag this is. The brand has its own signature. So people can see like Apple products from a distance and, oh, that's probably an Apple product. Right? They have a design to their... Allah has a signature in His design. Allah designed the universe. He also has a signature. What is His signature in the universe? It's balance. That's His signature. And then I look at myself and I seem to have balance in the way I can stand. I seem to have balance in the way I can move. I seem to have balance in the way my limbs are proportionate. I see balance in everything that He does. And the only thing out of balance is the way I behave. That's the only thing. So He says, He raised the sky and He laid down the balance so that you don't violate the balance. You don't violate the scale. You see the connection now? And that's a profound realization any human being should have arrived at. This leads me to this other really interesting conclusion here from where we started in this surah. The greatest way to know who Allah is Allah's own words. The greatest way. We started with that. Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Quran. There's no way you can know Allah better than Allah telling you Himself. That's Allah telling you Himself. Then it's as if you met the architect. You really know the architect. Okay, what's the next best thing? You've studied the architectural designs and their work, right? If I've studied the buildings that this architect made, I know some things about this architect. Do I know everything about this architect? I don't know their personality. I don't know their likes and dislikes, but I know some things about them. I know enough about what their design is like. Observing the universe, can it teach you something about God even if you don't know about religion? It can. It can teach you there's someone behind this mechanism that loves balance. But do you know everything about Him? You don't. But you do get somewhere. You do get somewhere. Now you'll appreciate, so the first layer, the highest level of getting to know Allah is His own words. The next level of getting to know Allah, the next best thing is at least paying attention to what? The skies. Then you get to know that Allah loves balance. Allah loves justice. Allah loves fairness. Allah loves things in due proportion. That's the next conclusion you reach. And there's going to be a third conclusion. Okay, some people don't have time to look at the sky. They're just busy on earth. You got to have time to look at the sky, right? So then people that are busy on earth, at least, even if they're busy on earth, can they see that things here are beautiful and made to make life easier for us in so many ways? So even if you don't arrive at the conclusion of justice, which is the higher conclusion, at least you should arrive at the conclusion that you should be grateful for what you've been given. Right? So now I've given you 3 levels. What's the highest level? Allah telling you Himself. What's the second level? The skies that leads you to a conclusion that there's someone who's just and balanced behind all of this. What's the third conclusion? Okay, even if I observe the world around, at least I should know someone is caring for me, and I should at least be what? Grateful. I should at least be grateful, right? These are the 3 levels, right? And we're going to see these 3 levels manifest in this opening passage. And that's when you really appreciate what the first one is. Because in that first one, we don't just learn about Allah's balance, we don't just learn about Allah's blessings, we learn so much more about Allah. Like, you really get to know Allah. Beyond just these glimpses of Allah. Without the Quran, we would have glimpses of God. We wouldn't have the whole picture. The ones He wants us to have. And that's what makes it Ar-Rahmanu 'allama al-Quran. Such an added rahmah from Allah that He taught us that. Okay, so let's move forward a little bit through this ayah and the next one, which is all related to the scale. And inshallah, we take something very heavy and beautiful from this. Allah tatghaw fil mizan. An can be what's called tafsiriya, meaning fatakun la nahiya. Allah made that sky, so He's telling you, don't violate scales. Like He's actually issuing a command. Another way to look at it is la nafiya. He made that balance in the universe that you can't mess with. You're not going to be able to mess with the balance in the universe. You're not going to be able to make the sun rise from the west. You're not going to be able to make the moon change its phases by your whim. He put something in place that you have no power over, that you may not be able to violate. As if Allah is saying, you make enough of a mess on earth. Right? You make enough of a mess on earth, but you can't mess with what I've created in the sky. I've given you some room to play on earth and to make a mess, but it doesn't go beyond that. So, if that's the case, Allah tatghaw fil mizan. Why use the word al-mizan? Imam Razi asked the question, why use the word al-mizan? Because the word mizan is actually a tool, like literally the scale that you hold and you put, items on both sides. That's actually called a mizan. So the use of that word actually suggests that you don't shortchange someone else and you don't take advantage yourself. Whether you're the buyer or the customer, either way, you're going to remain fair. So that's an added benefit that comes from the word mizan. But now we get to the conclusion of this. وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ. Now the third time mizan is coming. And establish the weight with justice. And so maintain all values justly. And don't shortchange when it comes to the scale. Scale, scale, scale. 3 times. Well, you see, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ. But all 3 mean 3 different things. The first one was about the harmony of the universe. The second one was about you not being able to mess with it. You can't mess with that harmony. And you better not mess with the scales in this life. But then the third one, he doesn't use the word mizan, he uses the word al-wazn. This is where, instead of getting into commentary, let me get practical with you. What does this mean? Wazn actually means weight. Wazn means what? Weight. And iqama means to preserve or to maintain or to give value. Now, instead of speaking philosophically, let's speak practical terms. Let's just take the example of marriage. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Of all the examples I could have chosen. Oh God. Okay, so in a marriage relationship, there are some fundamental rights and responsibilities. Some things are absolutely the right of a wife, and some things are absolutely the right of a husband, and responsibilities on both sides. Okay, that's what makes the marriage a marriage. Okay. Then on top of that, there are some other things you can do for each other that are extra credit assignments. Okay? You can do some bonus features. Those are additional. But there's the main course, there's this is what makes the marriage a marriage, and then there's the additional stuff. What has more weight? What has more weight? The main responsibilities and rights. That's what has the true weight. Then you can beautify the marriage with these additional things. Now imagine someone who says, oh, this main stuff is a little heavy. I would rather do all my focus on what? The extra stuff. And I think it's good enough. And you know what happens then? Chaos happens. Chaos happens. Why? Because you did not establish the right weight fairly. You understand? Something else deserved more weight. You put weight on the wrong place. Allah is not just talking about trade. The word wazn is used in Arabic, in the Quran actually, for all the deeds. وَالْوَزْنُ يَوْمَئِذٍ الْحَقِّ. The weight on that day will be real. Weight of what? Weight of every deed. Weight of every single deed. So we have to, in life, we have to decide how much weight to put on what. Another way that this concept is described in the Quran is يُنَبَّأُ الْإِنسَانُ يَوْمَئِذٍ بِمَا قَدَّمَ وَأَخَّرَ. Human beings will be informed of what things they put ahead and what things they set back. What are their priorities? What's your priority gets more weight. Weight can also be what gets more time, what gets more attention, what gets more focus, what gets more effort, what gets more money. You know, who gets, you know, in justice, it's not just who has more rights or who has to make more payment. This is actually about every transaction, whether it's financial or it's emotional or it's spiritual, everything has a weight. Think about our relationship with Allah. There's a fundamental relationship I have with Allah. Fundamental. And basically, practically speaking, on a daily basis, it boils down to 5 prayers. Minimum. If I have a minimum relationship with Allah, is He expects from me to meet with Him privately 5 times. Right? That's the expectation. But I say, no, but I can sit next to a window and talk to God and cry. So I don't have to, you know, the prayer, yeah, I don't pray, but I have this deep spiritual connection to Allah. Your deep spiritual connection that you want to, and the only time by the way, when somebody says that they sit by a window and cry, then I can guarantee you they don't sit by a window and cry. Unless there's a camera on and they can take a selfie of themselves sitting by a window and crying and then posting about it. As I can remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, sorry I called you out. Sorry if you recently posted a spiritual meme of yourself. There's something that's been given weight by Allah. The prayer's been given weight. Your personal spiritual journey doesn't have that much weight. You know? Then people hide behind all kinds of lame excuses. You know, I really want to pray, but I'm working through it right now. Really? Working through it. How? It's a process. Okay, working through it, process. Now we've got 2 words. What's this process? It's just a lot. Okay, now we've got 3 words. Working through it, process, and it's a lot. So how is it a lot? It's just really difficult. Can you explain how it's difficult? It's just, I can't even, you know what? You're causing me anxiety. You're committing an act of violence against me with these questions. Now what we've done, we've given these empty words. These are empty words, and what have we done? We've given them a lot of what? Weight. We've given them, and they have no weight. They have no weight. These are empty excuses. I'm working through something. Working through what? You know? You just can't, Allah expects you to surrender. I have a lot of anxiety right now. You know? My feelings have now developed. You know what Allah calls feelings, by the way? He calls them hawa. Hawa. And you know what hawa is also synonymous with? Air. And you know what? How much weight air has? None. None. And this is, now we've created an entire currency where feelings have the most weight. And truth has no weight. Because instead of truth, you just have my truth. You replace the two. There's truth, and then there's your feelings, which you call my truth. And I have my truth and you have your truth. This nonsense is actually aqimul wazna bil qis. Allah says, put the weight where it belongs. Be fair with the weight. Don't hide behind excuses. You know. And then wala tukhsiru al-mizan, and don't shortchange others in the scale. Don't show, and others, actually one tafsir of this was also wala tukhsiru anfusakum fil mizan. Make sure you give the right things weight, because not only will you not be shortchanging others, but you will end up shortchanging yourself on Judgment Day, when the actual weight is being established and your deeds have no weight because you put the weight on the wrong things. So he says, وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ. This entire sermon is just coming from pay attention to the sky. Because man, the moon has a certain weight, mass. If it had any more mass, it would smash into the earth. It has just the right amount of weight. The earth has just the right amount of mass and weight. The sun has just the right amount of weight. And they have just the right amount of distance. And what is that teaching me? Everything in my life needs to have the right kind of weight, the right kind of balance. You know? Every relationship has limits. Every relationship has limits. Every action has limits. Every transaction has limits. Actually, this is isti'ara in the Quran. Obviously, the idea of scale and weight has to do with trade, right? Buying and selling goods. Allah is using that as an analogy to talk about all of life. All of life is a series of transactions. My entire relationship with my mother and my father is a series of transactions. My entire relationship with my children is a series of transactions. Not financial, but emotional transactions, communication transactions. And in every one of those transactions, I have to have the right kind of scale. وَقِيمُ الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ. One thing you should know about the word qist, before I give you your break. One thing you should know about qist. Qist is actually to make sure you don't do wrong. It's actually, justice is adl, and qist is from lughatul afdad actually. Iqsat means to make sure you don't do wrong. In Arabic, it's really cool. Qasit is an unfair person, and muqsit is a fair person. So aqsata, the verb, af'ala pattern, actually means to be fair, and qasata means to be unfair. Therefore, aqsata actually means to make sure you're not being unfair. To make sure you're not being unfair. You know what that means? That means that Allah is saying, you and I have a very strong tendency that our default is that we will end up being what? Unfair. We have a very high likelihood of falling into unfairness towards ourselves, towards others. And we have to go out of our way to hold up the right balance to make sure we don't fall into unfairness. And by the way, the idea of holding something up, is that exhausting or no? Yeah. Allah is saying fairness is not on autopilot. Allah is saying fairness, you have to exhaust yourself and hold it up. And just because you held it up yesterday doesn't mean you're holding it up today. So when people say, you know, I'm like a really fair person, that must be your zodiac sign, I think. You're a really fair person? Really? Because Allah says the rest of the universe is on autopilot when it comes to fairness. Human beings are not. They have to be told. You have to do it. أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ. 3 times over? 3 times over like that? Why were we told that? Because that's a really hard thing for us to do. It's a really hard thing for us to do. Last comment on this, and I'll give you guys your break. Just, what is justice according to the Quran? Fairness according to the Quran. It's actually very politically incorrect. Fairness in the Quran is very politically incorrect. And what do I mean by that? There are things in culture, every culture, that you are made to feel guilty about that Allah doesn't want you to feel guilty about. The culture put a lot of negative weight on something, and Allah has put 0 negative weight on it. And there are things in culture where the culture wants you to celebrate something, or put a lot of positive weight on it, and the Quran puts 0 weight on it, or even negative weight on it. You understand that? Our definition of what is fair and unfair, what should be celebrated, what should be condemned, what should I feel guilty about, what should I not feel guilty about, all of that should come from where? That should come from Allah. And I don't have to compare us to the kuffar and to other. Let's talk in-house for a moment, just in-house. Are there situations where we are made to feel guilty about something within the Muslim family? Within the Muslim family, we're made to feel guilty about something that Allah would never make us feel guilty about. Yeah. I'm just telling you a scenario. This has nothing to do with any of you personally, so don't start looking around like who told you. Okay. There's a married couple, and the guy's mother doesn't like his wife. Don't look at me. Okay. Doesn't like his wife. And then she says to her son, if you come over to our house, I don't want you to bring her. Just bring my grandchild and you. I don't want to see her. Right? And then she then insults his wife to her son and says all kinds of terrible things. And then she says, Islam says you have to be the best to your mother. And she knows the song, who next your mother, who next your mother, Who next? Your mother. And then the dad from the other bedroom goes, what about your father? Like, but the point is, she now humiliates this guy's wife, and she says she can do so because she's what? So in your mind, are the angels that are recording these deeds, they're like, oh wait, she can say that, she's his mother. Let's cross that out. And one of the angels was writing it down, the other was, no, bro, it's mom. You don't write that. Riba, slander, humiliation, hurting another person, the humaza, lumaza. They don't count for a mother. Allah is not, because every mother has an immunity box on Judgment Day where they're not going to be asked anything because they're a mother. Is that how it works? No. But you know what? For a lot of people, they can take something from the Quran, like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take وَبِالْ وَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and I'm going to put a lot of weight on it. And now all of the ayat about ifk, slander, all the ayat about hurting someone with your tongue, all the ayat about looking at someone in a condescending way, all of those ayat we can ignore now. That's not, they don't have any weight because this has a lot of weight. Is that possible? Does that ever happen? Yeah, not in New Jersey. It only happens in New York. It doesn't happen here. But the point is, when Allah says, أَقِيمُ الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ, don't mess with your religion, folks. Don't take a part of your religion that serves you and then you leave everything else out. And it's not just a mother who can do it. A wife can do it. A husband can do it. A child can do it. Anybody can do it. And all of this boils down to one thing. You're putting weight on the wrong thing. If you and I become real students of the Quran, it's not just you're going to have interesting facts. It's not just you're going to have a lot of obscure knowledge, or you're going to be able to drop some Arabic quotes to somebody and they're going to be like, MashaAllah, oh my God, you know so much Arabic. That's not the goal. What is the Quran teaching us? What is the goal? You're going to develop a real sense of balance. So when somebody is saying something out of balance, you can catch it and say, no, can't do that. And when you're doing something out of balance, you can catch yourself. So you don't violate your own scale. You don't mess up your own scale on Judgment Day. You can find balance. وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ is profound. Is absolutely profound. And I pray we can bring that into our lives. That we can, qist is inside justice and outside justice. Justice when nobody's watching, not just justice in a courtroom. Justice in a courtroom is adl. Justice in private and public, that's qist. Aqimul wazna bil qist. So there's sometimes people are watching, other times people aren't watching, but you better maintain your standards of justice. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us from the muqsitin. I'm going to give you guys a good long 10-minute break and we'll continue our final session. Barakallahu li wa lakum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.